We're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening. Welcome to the Township Board meeting for Tuesday, May 28th. And I'd like to ask Mr. Atkins to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As we call the meeting to order, I'll seek approval for our agenda, our consent agenda, and our regular agenda. Do I have a motion?
I make the motion.
Second.
Okay, it's motion supported. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we will open the floor for citizen comment, and as all of you probably know, we allow 3 minutes for your comments, and please state your name and address. We don't necessarily respond to every comment, but we take your input and note it, and if we need to get back to you, we'll do that. Okay? So we'll start over here on the left side of the room, and we'll work our way back. So. Okay, all right. Well, welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Robert Budzinski. I live at 6170 Saddle Creek Court in Grand Blanc. And of course, I'm here to talk about the roads. The good old roads, Pine Hollow Estates. At the last meeting, Ken's not here today, I see. At the last meeting, the last thing that was said to us was, we're going to find some help for you. That was said by Ken Thomas. And I smiled and I thought, oh, gosh, that's really great. Then I found out that we're not in favor. We can't figure out why. It doesn't cost you anything. We pay all of our own expenses. The money is guaranteed. We don't know what we've done wrong. We've got the petitions that you asked for at 71% for the roads. I'm sure that the other percentage of people just didn't bother to answer. It's not a no on their case, it's just, that's the way people are. And I let Joe do it, that sort of thing. So I have the document that says you can allow the bond if you choose to. I'd like to give you each one of those pieces of this document if I may.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
I'm going to try to not take up more than my 3 minutes. We're taxpayers, we're voters, we're willing to do the roads at our own cost other than the bond, of course, which is guaranteed, as you all know. We'll pay all the bills, we'll pay all of the oversight that we have to hire the engineering company to overlook, make sure the roads are all done correctly. We're not asking anybody to chip in for that. We're going to do all of that ourselves. We've followed all the requirements, including the petitions, the road quotes, and we're not any further along now than we were when I started this. We need the roads, and we feel like you're preventing us from going ahead by not allowing us to receive a bond. All we really want to know is, what's the problem? What is it that we've done so badly that you don't want to help us have the roads? Anybody got an answer for that?
Well, let's get the rest of the public input, and
Okay.
as we move on, we actually had a task force for our streets and roads, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the meeting. Okay. If we attempted to answer every question of anybody who attends our meetings, our whole agenda would change for the evening. So we take all the input, and if we've addressed it, we will cover it in our meeting. If not, we'll make sure that we address it in the future. Okay, so further on, I'm sorry, sir? Okay.
I'm Valinda McKenna. I'm at 6287 Cantor Creek Trail. And I'd just like to go with what Bob Budzinski is saying. It doesn't make any sense. why we're not able to get the roads, because if it's a matter of collateral, we pay our taxes. The collateral is there in our homes. So I just don't understand why we aren't able to get this bond. And I'm not going to take up a lot of time because, I mean, really it's just a no-brainer to me. I just don't understand how our roads can look so bad and we can drive across the street and the roads are better. I'd just like for us to have good roads. That's all.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer Silverton, and I live at 6279 Cantor Creek Trail, and I was also at the last meeting. I echo Bob and Belinda's comments. I know you don't need 10 people saying the same thing, but we do believe there's strength in numbers, and I think safe to say majority of the attendees here tonight are my neighbors, and we do feel passionately about this. But to take the comments a bit further, and hopefully you can include this in your commentary back, if you could walk us through when you're prepared tonight what the steps are, the follow-up, what's the timetable, what you said. I think you said a committee was formed. I mean, what are next steps? What can we expect so that we can plan and prepare? And I also want to add that we touched on this at the last meeting, but there have been countless potential buyers, vendors that come in, and the first thing they comment on is the irony of the condition of the homes and how not reflective it is of the neighborhood, condition of the streets, excuse me, and how not reflective that is, you know, of the homes in the whole neighborhood. And certainly that's something that none of us want. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'll add one more number to the mix. My name is Jeff Carto. I live at 8180 Pine Hollow Trail. We just moved to the subdivision last year, and you know, we love everything about it except for the roads. The roads are in really, really bad shape, and I'll echo what Jennifer said. My wife had a number of people come up and visit us that she works with from Oakland County, and they said these houses are beautiful, but the roads are unbelievably bad. And you know, it's you know, on a private road, I know it's an expensive amount, and to be able to expect every single neighbor in the neighborhood to come up with the entire amount in one fell swoop is a lot to ask in any neighborhood. Whereas the bond, I think, would probably satisfy just about everybody in the neighborhood in being able to get the roads fixed. So I hope that's taken into consideration, the overall beautification of not just the neighborhood, but Grand Blanc Township, you know, reflect well on the township, I think. Thanks.
Thank you.
James Culver, and I'm at 6263 Cantor Creek Trail. I'm a past president of Phase 1, and we've been trying to get roads replaced for the last 5 to 6 years. It's really long overdue. Every year we pay for patching, and it's just a stopgap measure. They really need to be replaced. It's a waste of money, I think, each year, and it really detracts from property values.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm Vipul at 8272 Pine Hollow Trail, and just two comments as input. One is that I run around quite a bit around different subdivisions, and so you know there's a lot of roads that also are in bad condition, and I don't know all the implications of a bond, but in case, you know, if it's all 100% on the homeowners, that's okay. But if there's any cost savings from doing multiple subdivisions, I mean, I'm sure there's probably several subdivisions along McCandlish and other roads that would probably love to do their roads if there's a cost savings there. So by chance, if that comes up in your discussion, again, it may be a complete independent decision. Second thing I just wanted to comment is that about bike paths, which as Scott and Dennis know, I've been trying to help encourage for a few years, and Monica Shapiro has been working on that now and taking up the mantle. So I think there is a project coming up on McCandlish Road, a drain resurfacing, and just nothing that in that, Scott? Okay, because that was a potential thing that was coming up. But if there's ever any opportunity where, you know, you can consider a pathway, we have so many homeowners, thousands of people that live along that 1 mile stretch, and it's always constantly people biking, running, walking. It would be great to be able to see an opportunity to have a nice pathway there and just encourage that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bill Owen
Good evening.
from 6153 Gateway Drive, Gaitway, 48439. I've been a long-time resident there, one of the longest. I've been there over 20 years. The roads were originally county roads. They were given back to us, and now they're private roads. We maintain them. We plow our own snow in the winter, and we want to maintain our roads for the surface. All we're asking you for is we're not asking you for any money. We're not asking you to underwrite a bond issue. We are not asking you to co-sign for a bond issue. We are only asking you to help us go to the bond market so we can get one, because we can't get it on our own. So that's all we'd like to do, and we want to maintain our own roads. Shouldn't cost you anything, except for some help.
Jim Sable, 6170 Gateway, again, Gaitway. I'm the original developer of Pine Hollow. And for a point of clarification, we initially dedicated these roads to the county. Everything was built to the county specs, etc. Currently, I'm putting in 40 lots to finish out the balance of Pine Hollow, which will give it a 98 home subdivision on some odd 400 acres. And I'm spending my own $1 million to do it. But again, we're private. How we got private, when John Daly was elected, or excuse me, hired, however he got here as the director, I had spent $500,000 on the front entry. Nobody in Genesee County, probably nobody in Detroit had done that. But I personally spent $500,000 on the front entry to create something that was really, really special, i.e. Pine Hollow. So Daly, upon his arrival, decided that he didn't like the fact that, I don't even remember, 20 years later, Bill said 20, I assume it's 20. But I'll take him at his words. Whatever it was, he didn't like it. So Paul Parker, again, these are names that you aren't familiar with, they're all retired now. Paul Parker called me up and he said, even though you've dedicated the roads to me, we literally passed the roads on. And however they did it, I don't know, we accepted it later, but anyway, he deeded it back to us, indicating that the $500,000 that I spent to create an atmosphere of something special, he didn't like. So notwithstanding that, we got him back. I also am a realtor and a broker. So I can certainly comment, I probably sold every home in there at least twice, that some of the comments when they come to my office and tell me that all but for the roads, I couldn't quantify how many, but I can guarantee that there's been a substantial amount of people walking, not wanting to go in there. They can't figure out, or they're afraid that if they got in there, there might be some kind of an assessment that would be mind-boggling. And we're talking about, well, I already have bids. I have half a dozen bids on this that are going concurrent with me putting the back pavement in. We would have had it back in by now. Our curb machine broke, or the companies, and so we expect to have the curbs in this week and the balance of the asphalt and back. Somebody mentioned economy of scale. We would like to do this in concurrence with me putting in the final phase. We're going to put in the first lift in the back on the 40 lots. I think we've got an agreement with the township that they're going to allow us to hold off on the second, which, by the way, is very important because we wound up having to put all the phases in, that is, all the lifts, we'll call it, in Pine Hollow, and therefore, during the course of construction, many times things get beat up. So this time we're hoping that we can put the first phase in, bond over, etc., whatever it takes. This is not an economic issue. Actually, it is an economic issue from the standpoint that it's hurting the value. I was at a tax tribunal case in dispute with the township over the area in the back that I couldn't build on, and it was, quote, it was the gal here, I can't remember now which one said it, but anyway, she had stats to prove at the tax tribunal in front of 3 judges that the property has a 20% diminishing value when the roads are in the abhorrent condition that we are. 20%. So recently, we built a home in Pine Hollow, just finished it, wonderful homeowner, I don't think he's here tonight, but it's $1.3 million. 20%, that's $260,000. So we have to get, and again, and I understand, I've been in front of this board for a zillion different reasons, and I know that it can't be economic. So in this case, they're not asking for anything economic. All they're asking for is a right, since apparently one of the attorneys found for Bob, the Public Act may allow you to do this. Now, there's been some conversation that you don't want to do it because it might set a pattern or set a precedent. But the facts are that if these 60 people in here, it's going to cost about $5,000 a house. I've got bids around $300,000. So if these 60 people are willing to pick up all of the costs, and they've said it, everybody said it, it's redundant now, including the underwriting costs, I can't imagine that it sets a precedent that if another private road group came in here and said that they're willing to pay 100% of it, or excuse me, they're willing to pay 70% of it, and you only allowed us to pay 100% of it, seems to me that you're out. So with that said, I don't want to wear myself out either, so I hope that we're going to have some other discussion, but that's I want to bring clear that they were public originally, they're built to public specs, the government gave them back after we spent $500,000.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment? Any other public comment about the back row? No?
Can I make one more quick follow-up comment on the snow plowing? When we moved in, the township used to handle our snow plowing, and it doesn't now. So I was told it changed from public to private connotation. So just to mention that, we also, as some people have said, pay for our own snow plowing. So another, factor to consider, that we've been pretty independently doing things, and just again, hope you all will support us.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and we will bring this back up to the board.
Can I just make a quick comment on that?
Sure.
The part of the snow plowing,
Can you go up to the mic just so it gets recorded properly? Thank you.
the snow plowing and the public roads were not nearly at the same time. We were private roads a long time ago, but we were still getting snow plowed. Problem was that the township didn't feel they had enough money to do the private roads, and so we were notified, and then we started picking up the fee for the roads. So it didn't happen in harmony with the private roads.
All right, thank you. With that, we will close citizen comments, and our consent agenda was passed, so we won't be commenting on that. With regard to future positioning, anything with regard to Parks and Rec? Mr. Atkins, any recent?
Nothing really to report.
Okay. And Mr. Laddie, I think, has been working on a few things with regard to Parks and Rec.
I have, and I don't have anything to
report on. Okay. With that, we'll move right on to our Streets and Roads Task Force. And Mr. Massey, myself, Ms. Lane had a meeting with Mr. Limata. And one of the things that, with regard to the issue that's been brought before us this evening, we said that we wanted to have Mr. Laddie give us a written opinion on the whole issue of financing for private activity.
You did, and I did. And I'll pass these down, and you can just take one and take a look at it. I'll just run through it briefly. I'll try to paraphrase it. Again, the public improvement statute that we've been provided tonight, it is permissible for a township to create a special assessment district for a private road. And one of the things that's interesting about that part of this statute is that, as a general rule, governments can't spend public money on private property or private interests. And if you read the other permissible provisions of this statute, you'll see that they essentially correspond with that theory. And the carve-out for the private roads is important, and it allows the municipality to make a choice if they want to engage in the improvements and financing for public roads. What we've done in the past traditionally is we have had people that come to us and ask us to create special assessment districts for their subdivision roads because they don't have the ability to gather themselves together as an entity with any sort of authority and collect money, frankly, that people are going to need to pay for these roads. And the way that we typically do them is we will collect petitions, we'll hold a public hearing, we'll decide if there's a public need to have their roads resurfaced. And very early on, we will get the county road commission involved because, as we say a lot here, we don't own any roads.
So when you say they don't have the way to gather themselves, does that mean like they're not a legal entity?
Correct. Right.
In most subdivisions, they're
That's
not a legal entity.
I'm glad you raised that point because when you buy in a condominium association, whether it's a site condominium association like Pond Hollow, or it's a traditional condominium, attached condominium, you are a unit holder and a part of a master deed. And there are many aspects of that development that are common areas that are shared by the unit owners, and also the responsibility is shared by the unit owners. And one of the mechanisms that the state has created for homeowners associations and condominiums to maintain their facilities is they have the ability to, if the association decides to move ahead and make improvements, whether they be for roads or lights or landscaping or what have you, and they're able to collect the money from their residents and place those amounts of money as liens against the properties. And if you don't pay those liens, then you could find yourself in a foreclosure process, much like you could at the state or at the county tax or county treasurer's office. And you could theoretically lose your home for some bill that you didn't pay for a common area assessment. That process has a similar, although much slower and complicated, parallel path with public property. And I'm going to call a plat, for example, you actually own a lot in a plat. It's drawn out the same way as a condominium, but you own all the area within the boundary of what you purchased in that particular lot. There aren't, particularly in townships, there aren't common areas. You don't own the roads. The roads in Grand Blanc are owned and maintained and operated by Genesee County Road Commission. So that's a big difference, right? So now you have an association with common elements with the power to essentially tax itself. And that is what plat owners don't have. And so they need to come to us to find some way to raise money because they don't have
A legal entity.
Condominium association has. What we do when we get that request is right off the bat, we have to contact Genesee County Road Commission because we have a DPW department, but we focus primarily on sewer and water operations. We don't do anything that has to do with roads in our DPW department. We don't have any expertise on how to engineer a road, on how to inspect a road, on what improvements should be made and what improvements shouldn't be made. We are basically lay people as far as roads are concerned. Our only involvement is, again, to ask the County Road Commission if this improvement is something they will consider, and then they will be in charge of all the engineering, all the inspections, all the bidding, all of the repair work. I didn't say warranty work because people come to us all the time and say, is there a warranty on this and how long will this last? But the County Road Commission is in charge of all that. And one of the interesting things that we have encountered when we do borrow money for these improvements is we get bond counsel involved, and they have to be involved because they are going to represent to the banks that the interest that the banks will earn on that loan is tax-free. And they have to be specially qualified by the Department of Treasury. And that's why when we get an opinion letter from Roger Sweats and Dickinson Wright, that letter costs us about $6,500. And that is the representation to the bank that they're able to collect that interest tax-free to themselves. And that's an expensive thing for the homeowners to go through, and it's an interesting process for us to go through. But Anyway, we are essentially then, we just become the administrator of the money. We're waiting for instructions from the road commission, we wait for instructions from the bond council, and when it comes through, then there is a relationship between the road commission and the contractor, and then we just send a check out, the work's done, they tell us it's done, and then we collect the payments. We collect the payments for 10 years usually, if the road commission can verify to our bond council that that improvement will last that long. Sometimes, in fact, the most recent one we've done, they wouldn't verify that the road had a life of 10 years, and so we had to reduce that to 5 years because the bond council required that it had to have, it actually had to reflect the usable life of the road. The interesting thing when we talk about special assessment districts for private roads is that they are not going to have that interest on that bond will not be tax-free to the banks. So there is no economic savings if you did a private road improvement. The biggest thing, the biggest impediment in my mind still, as someone that's represented this board and future and past boards, is the problem with the lack of expertise at the township as far as deciding what contractor to go with, what work should be done, who should the engineer be, who should do the inspections and how often, what will the warranty work be, because you will have a relationship, you'll be the one that writes the check to the paving company. And we have no idea what's really involved in that process. Now, people will say, well, you could require us to hire road engineering, we can go through that entire process, we'll just do whatever Rose says. But the problem with that, from my standpoint, is that still leaves a disconnect between the township being the party that's contracting with the road company, an independent consultant being Rowe or some other company, and the property owners. And that historically has been a big problem for the township boards. They're uneasy about doing that.
So is the township the only one that can bond or borrow money for road projects, or can these legal entities such as homeowner associations and condo associations borrow money?
No, that's a good question. In my conversations, again, with the bond council that we use, I think it's right. He said that homeowners associations for condominiums can borrow money for improvements. And that is an interesting concept, because that means if there's no tax benefit for us borrowing the money, then the money has to be borrowed at a commercial rate of interest. And if it has to be borrowed at a commercial rate of interest, then an association could get the same rate, essentially, that we get. And we had quite a long discussion about that with them, and I find that to be an interesting concept, because that may be an avenue available for people in condominium associations that just need the funding, and the folks here tonight say it's just a matter of funding for us. So that is an important thing to consider. The other thing to consider, and this again was advice from Dickinson Wright, is that when you have private roads, sometimes you'll have associations. I don't think Pine Hollow has a gate, for example. I think its roads are basically open. But you can't have a gate if you're going to do an improvement that's a public special assessment, even though they're private roads. There will be ongoing concern whether or not that property is actually open to the public or not. And again, I don't think this is a big problem here, because I don't think the site plans call for these roads to be gated. But that would be one of the prohibitions. So when you add that all up together, it turns out that, again, based on Mr. Sweat's advice, that we have nothing to offer a private association that they can't do for themselves. They have the ability to tax themselves and collect money from each other. They have the ability to borrow money at a commercially available rate of interest. They have the ability to decide what improvement they want to do, when, how, should there be an engineering company involved, does there not need to be one? They have control of their project if they want it. And so for those reasons, my suggestion to you is to continue to consider to not do private improvements for, special assessments for private improvements. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer.
Mr. Laddie, that does, so you mentioned, common areas in a HOA or condo development. So for example, I think a couple of our board members actually live in communities that have that situation, and Actually, they've talked to me about their subdivision, if they wanted to put a pool in, for example. And that's a private activity that they come to the township and ask us to finance or bond that.
Right.
Or put new roofs on their condos, or what have you.
I think that as an illustration, those are good examples. I think that someone may argue that they're different because they're not specifically identified in the statute, but it's the same theory.
Yes, Mr. Massey.
I have a question, Attorney Laddie. Does this private road section of Pine Hollow, does it have bylaws, subdivision bylaws?
Mm-hmm. It's master deed bylaws.
Okay. What's in the bylaws?
Well,
Well, let me ask it. Let me finish my question, because what's in the bylaws? In the bylaws, does it say condominium, something else?
you mean, it is a condominium association. Pine Hollow is a condominium association. It has a master deed and it has bylaws, and those bylaws and master deeds are consistent with the requirements of the state. And so it is a condominium association.
Okay.
Set up corporation and
Yep.
board members, what have you.
Correct.
I thought you said earlier that a condominium has the rights to borrow money.
They can borrow money.
Okay. So would that apply to Pine Hollow?
Sure.
So what's the problem here? Is the problem they want they'll have to borrow money on their own through the homeowners association, right? Okay. So the problem is that the township wouldn't have any involvement in it.
In the borrowing of the money?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, and the project. If Pine Hollow was able to get its own financing, they could bundle it together with any other concurrent project. They can decide the thickness of the asphalt. They can decide, I mean, they have full control.
Or they could tie in other projects with it if they wanted to put another gate up, or, I mean, not a gate, but an
You could have a
entryway.
gate if
But I mean, they could put up an entry at one of the other locations, or put in a community building, or what have you, and finance it together. Mr. Mansur?
So, so I have a question. I mean, maybe Mr. Lehman has the answer to this. As I take a look at the growth in the residential properties around Grand Blanc Township, it seems to me that most of them, most of the recent ones, end up being site condominiums, whether they're Del Webb divisions or my particular Woodfield or others. So it seems like a growing percentage of the township, and it's basically how developers are able to efficiently, I'll say, put in mini homes. As that becomes a more prevalent way to do things, I mean, I think that the board ought to consider the fact that more and more of our roads are going to be subject to this over a period of time. So I guess I would like to think pretty carefully about, given that a bigger percentage of the township is going to look like that, it will have a growing impact on what our township looks like. And so it may just be something that we have to come to terms with in terms of maybe narrowly constructing some kind of a way to get that done. Again, just if it was a one set of properties in one place, it's kind of different. But again, as it seems to grow, I think it maybe becomes a bigger issue for the board to consider.
Most of those, you're correct in your assessment of where you're reducing some of the site condo developments, but most of those turn the roads over to the county. Most of them build them to county standards, and they are county roads, so they're still all eligible for the same kind of financing as county roads. And that's the difference between Pine Hollow and some of the other developments that you're thinking of, is that those are built to county standards and turned over to the county. Pine Hollow had a long punch list of the things that they would have had to have accomplished in order for those to be county roads, and that's why they're not county roads. That went back to like 2003 or something, was the list that they were provided by the county saying, here's the things that you need to accomplish And it was changing the signs out and I think verifying some of the engineering, but there was a long punch list that they would have had to have done, and that was just never completed.
So I'd like to, I think I'll do some research on that and kind of see where these site condos are ending up in that spectrum.
Part of our challenge in the township, I think, is that there's quite a few developments that have roads that are maintained by the county. And the dilemma is that getting the 51% of the residents to agree that they want to pay to have them done. And the benefit I see of the HOA or what have you, if they own their own roads, is they can decide whether or not to pave them. You know, and right now these people get signatures, they bring it to the board, and you know, half the subdivision or 49% of them decide, hey, we don't want to, you know, pay for this, and the other 51%, and then we're caught in the middle with, you know, hey, the majority of the people want it paved, and everybody's going to have to pay for it. But you know, the HOA, I'm sure they have other battles besides, you know, whether or not they should pave the roads. But and actually we had there's an organization here in Grand Blanc Township called the Homeowners Association, and actually they had a law firm there that represents HOAs and condo associations, and actually they were talking about this specific issue, and they were talking about financing of roofs and what have you, and that they can take people to court that, you know, place liens against their property that don't pay. And so and that meeting was just this past month, but it was pretty widely accepted amongst everybody there, you know. And is it Bose, I think, from Warwick heads it up, and so anyways, it seemed pretty common knowledge that these organizations can borrow money. But Mr. Guzak?
So I just had one other question then. If they wanted to go back and have public roads out there and turn it into a public road, then we could do it, right? I mean, within the...
Well, you could do it either way. What would happen is if it became a public road, is the road commission would then be responsible.
Right, yeah, they'd have to do all the work, and then we're out of it. They were just doing the same thing. So they could technically turn it into a public road and then spec it out, and then we could handle it for them, right?
Yeah, when you use an interesting term, they would spec it out according to their specifications.
Right, the county would.
They're in the business of building roads and repairing roads. They don't do it as often as we like, but they have all the expertise in that area.
So let me just play devil's advocate. If we finance this, and you're saying, David, that we would write the check to the paving company or whatever, and usually we've seen this with other subdivisions where we've actually done the bonding. The residents call us and say, hey, they didn't do this right, they didn't do that right. And we're caught and right now we can say, hey, all we did was finance the thing. It's between you and the road commission that was done. You know, all we did was go ahead and get the bonding. In this situation, those complaints are going to end here because we actually are the ones that paid for the construction and what have you.
That's correct, and again, unless there was some third-party engineering or inspection firm, we would be relying completely on them as far as what's right, what's wrong, and what needs to be done. And that is that's a little unsettling from our perspective, just because we don't. It's an area we're not equipped to handle.
Yeah. Typically with a subdivision, I know the question came up, one of the residents asked, you know, what's typically the walk through the steps, I think was the question for, you know, paving a road or what have you. And I think, you know, just to bring that up is that typically when a subdivision says, hey, we want to pave our roads, they come here and talk to our DPW director. He contacts the road commission, or, you know, Jeff Sears, our DPW director, he contacts the road commission. The road commission puts together, goes out, takes a look, makes an estimate, comes back. We provide that estimate to the residents that are interested in it. Those residents then talk with their fellow neighbors in that subdivision and say, hey, this is what the estimated price looks like for paving our streets. Those residents then decide, hey, you know what, this looks feasible. Let's let's start a petition to see if we can get enough, if we can get 51% of the residents to sign on. The township prepares them a petition that they can use, or I imagine they could use their own, but they go out, they get signatures on that petition. If they get 51%, then we hold a public hearing and say, is this accurate information that 51% of the people are represented here that want this done? They say yes. We contact the road commission. They then in turn hire an engineer. That engineering firm starts laying out, they start paying some money, that engineering firm, to start doing the actual detail of that work that's going to be needed, whether it's going to need new sewers, new gutters, what have you. And they inspect it and come up with a solid number of what it's going to cost. They come back to our board and say, hey, you know what, it's 10% or 15% over what we estimated, or it's under, what have you. We have a second public hearing and we say, hey, this is what the final cost looks like it's going to come out to be. Do you guys still want it? And sometimes we have had situations where the residents say, hey, wait a minute, that cost is more than what we were willing to swallow, and we don't want to do it now. Or they say, hey, this is something we want to move forward with.
And you're right, once the train leaves the station, it goes, and regardless of where the bids come in, and regardless of whether they exceed the previous estimate by 10% or 20% or 30%, you almost, I mean, the homeowners, it's very difficult to stop. And the road commission, once they've committed engineering expenses, they won't stop either. And it becomes, you really lose control over the cost and the specs of the job when they do it.
So after, let's say there's a second public hearing where we say, here's what the final tally is going to be, we take a vote on this board whether or not we move forward with, because we're going to write a check for that amount. And these people we're going to put it on their tax rolls. We're going to go out for, Mr. Guzak goes out for a bond for that. But all I'm bringing up is there's multiple facets to this thing. There's cost overruns, possibly. There's engineering concerns, you know, people with sump pumps, you know, having those connected correctly or what have you. And for the township to be in the middle of that, we just aren't equipped for that. It's more of a road commission project, and if the road commission isn't doing it, then there needs to be some other third party that would do that for them. So if a condo association or HOA, what have you, wants to do it, they would probably be best to hire an engineering firm and use that engineering firm to seek out bids and to oversee the project so that the specs are followed. Let's say that Pine Hollow wants to bring their roads up to county specs and turn them over to the county. I think, as Mr. Lehman mentioned, there's a long list of a punch list of things that need to be upgraded in order to become county road. So that engineering firm would need to take a look at that list and say, here's the improvements we need to make if we want to bring these up to county specs, and then get quotes for doing that, get the work done, and then after it's done, they probably would accept them as county roads. I don't know.
That's one way to go. Probably what would be more likely would be if you had an engineering firm, they would do something, because for a lot of different reasons, roads won't meet county specs for a lot of different reasons. It can be the way they're designed, the way they're built, soil conditions, things like that. But one of the things that communities will do is allow private development to have more roads that are more narrow, roads that are less, they're not as thick, they're cheaper to build, they're cheaper to maintain, and probably what would happen is they would say, we would recommend to you, you know, instead of 3 inches of asphalt, 1.5 inches will probably work for this number of years, and the price difference will be here. What do you guys want to do for the association? The association will be able to do that. Whereas, again, when the road commission does it, again, I almost said they're way of the highway, but you have no choice. You just you have to go with what they do.
Right. Just, you know, let's just use examples for if it was, you know, roofs on a house on a condo development and we were going to get involved. We really have no expertise in that area or any of these other things. In roads, we don't have any expertise in either. Mr. Massey?
Yeah. Am I hearing that they need to go to the road commission?
No, not necessarily, because they're not county roads. If they want to make them county,
That's an option.
if they want them to pass as county roads and pass them on to them, well, it sounds like there's a list already of those specs that they would need to meet, but probably wouldn't hurt to get an updated one with the new road commissioner in place. But the road commission might not be a bad place if they're looking at, turning them over to the county, to certainly have a meeting with them to find out what they would require. Is that accurate, Mr. Lehman?
That's one way to go. The other thing they could do is if they met with Ace Asphalt and they've got a quote for $340,000 and they want to go ahead with that quote, they need to just go to a bank, see if they can borrow the money.
I would recommend they hire an engineering firm to oversee the work to make sure that it's going to solve the problem. I don't know, maybe Ace Engineering's or Ace Paving is providing engineering, but you'd probably want a independent party. But we really don't have anybody that's capable of that. I think what I would be willing to do is to, talk with I imagine there's a board for the development, correct, for Pine Hollow, and see what the dilemma is, and them borrowing money, but it's really a private matter that I really shouldn't probably be involved in anyways. But
no, that would be an interesting. I mean, it'd be interesting to be kept up to date on that. What efforts are made, what progress, if any. I mean, because. And again, I got this information from Roger, who does a lot of condominium work. He's over on the west side of the state, but I'd be interested to hear how the local banks react to that kind of proposal, and if they'll loan money on it, or if they won't, and that feedback would be helpful to us.
And it is, I want to make sure our residents know that, the county takes care of all the roads in the township, and or is charged with it and has the jurisdiction of them. And as I forget who it was that mentioned, I think it was Mr. Sable that mentioned, the value of homes and looking at the streets, that you can oftentimes see from the decay of the streets how it affects, the home values and the homes themselves and how they're maintained. I know, your homes are immaculately kept there, so I'm not too concerned about that. But the problem is that, what happens in one part of the township affects everybody, and we want to make sure that we maintain and help maintain roads, and if there's something that we can do to help facilitate that, we want to do that, but short of going out for financing for private projects. But I'd be glad to sit down with a couple of your board members and see if there's some stumbling blocks to being able to finance it, or what actually is the dilemma. But I'd also like to make sure that if you have the work done, that if there's a third party, that recommendations we can make as far as engineering firms, what have you, we'd be glad to do that, so that you're not just hiring a paving company and not getting what you need to make sure the job is done up to standards. And if it's something you want to look at, getting them up to county specs, let's get a meeting with the road commission, with the director, and talk with them on how do we do that, and if that's a desire that your board has. So I think our board wants what's best, for you, and for the roads. That's certainly mine, and I believe every one of our board members' concerns. It's just how we go about getting that done. Okay? So if your board, if you want to jot down, or take my card and contact me with who the board members are that would like to meet with me, I'd be glad to sit down and talk. And by no means are we saying that, we want this thing to come to an end. We want you guys to get, your residents to get good roads in there somehow, some way. Okay? Any other questions from the board? And we'll make.
Scott, is there any chance of a quick 2-minute discussion, just to see, especially Bob has done a lot of research on this, just to see if he has some follow-up thoughts, instead of waiting, just to see if you have anything to say about it that's important.
I only have one question.
Go ahead, Mr. Kaczynski.
If in fact we get a bond,
Yes.
a private bond,
Or a loan for it? Sure.
for a private road from whatever bank we can get it from.
Right.
We then do not pay any monies to you, we give it to the bank, of course.
Correct.
Okay. So it will not affect our taxes in any shape or form.
No?
So that will require a special assessment.
Well, not by us.
No.
Yeah. That'll be internally within your organization.
I'm sorry?
That would be within, you probably already pay homeowner association fees, right? So it would be within that.
That's what I'm asking. So that means that if
And
it's a
there's,
special
yeah, and there's some homeowner associations that a portion of their homeowners association goes into a fund to pay for those type of things, so that when they need to be paved, guess what? They already have a couple $100,000 set aside from everybody paying their dues, and a certain percentage of it goes into that fund.
We got about 348 bucks.
Oh, really? Okay, well,
Well, we're
all right.
in a little bit better shape, but not close
Right.
to.
Okay.
But that would
We'll take one more question, then we're gonna move on. Yes, sir.
Bill Owen, 6153 Gateway Drive.
Yes.
Hi now. There are the two presidents, it is two condo associations.
Okay.
And both the presidents are sitting right here.
Okay.
They've done work on this already.
Okay. Well, let's sit down and talk and see. I'll give you my card and my cell number and email's on there. So let's get together and see what we can do to help you get the financing you need. Okay.
And we have the 71%.
We have 71%.
Okay.
We were here in that meeting.
Yeah, then you should be able to get the bank to finance. So we'll talk and we'll see what we can do. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thanks.
Can I just ask one question, David? I know it's close. but,
Okay.
In the new section, everything's built to county specs as it was before, and I'm paying you to pay Rowe to inspect the curbs and the asphalt and everything. So I'm now at $73,000 in inspection fees to you to build private roads. So whoever said that there's something different, these are built to county specs. Same with the front rows.
Aren't we inspecting the water system?
Say what?
Drainage?
That was part of that, yes. With the road, currently now I've got $8,700 just in, it was 2 years ago it was 16,000, so now it's another 8,700. The point being that, let me just ask, here's really my question. Can they just do this without coming back to you at all, if they just all?
Who's this? I'm not sure.
This group here. Can they collectively go to the bank and get money? I understand, because I'm the one who brought that law firm to your meeting. I'm the one that suggested Steve Guerrero.
Well, they come annually, so.
So anyway, the question is, can they go just to the bank? Do they have to come back to you for anything? Do you know?
No.
Nothing, okay. Bob? Bob, you don't have to come back to them for anything if you decide to do the road. You have some idea that they have to inspect it. If you choose to do this by a private bank, you don't have to come to them for anything. They're your roads, just so you know that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, no, you told me we have to spend money for an inspection fees. We don't.
I was assuming that we were getting it bonded through them. In that case, then road engineering would have to look over.
Yeah.
Correct, but as private roads, if you choose to do it with a bank or something, then they don't have to come back here. That was the only question.
But you could still hire a row, you could pay a row for the inspections.
We'll get together and talk. Yes.
Could you give us a letter that says that, so we know that's, could you give us a letter?
Stating what? Letters?
Stating that we can do it ourselves, and we can go borrow money and do this project.
I handed out an opinion to you guys if you want to give them a copy of that.
Yeah.
It's not a confidential
Here.
document.
Thank you very much.
I think that's the one, right?
Gives us a little clout to go to.
Yes.
Yeah.
You've
Yeah.
agreed that-
And I've got, yeah. Okay. All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. What's that?
We just want.
Hey, I don't blame you. We want you to get them. We want you to be able to
Just
get
have
them.
to drive down there sometime.
No, I've been over there.
You have this.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Certainly.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Yes.
We're going to continue on. Our Tech Village. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And if anybody else wants my card, I'll give you that too. Feel free to give me a call. Okay, the next item on the agenda, Tech Village. I don't know, I'm sure Mr. Limita has a report at the end, but I think the next one down the list here that we want to probably cover is with regard to our operational issues. And that's the board will consider a motion to provide dates for the annual Board of Trustees Planning Commission joint meeting. Mr. Limita?
So as you guys know, we try to meet at least once per year and have discussions with Director Lloyd in regards to everything that's going on between the Planning Commission and with the Township Board. And as we're getting ready to go into our master planning process, we also have the DDA and those kind of projects that we think it would behoove us to all have those conversations together with both Township Board and Planning Commission. Mark and I were suggesting that maybe the fourth Tuesday meeting in June, the 25th, if we were able to meet at 5:30 instead of 7 o'clock, and he was going to pull the Planning Commission to see if that worked for them. So it would be the fourth Tuesday in June, 5:30, and for a joint meeting.
Okay.
If that
So
works
they-
for everybody.
Sound okay?
Fourth Tuesday?
Fourth Tuesday before?
I'll be out.
Okay, okay. That won't work for you then now?
Nope.
How about either of the earlier June meetings if we did the 11th or 13th?
That's
work?
fine. Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
How about
That
the 13th might be better, because our meetings on Tuesdays tend to run a lot longer than the ones on Thursday, right?
Yes.
Sure.
As long as there's no
So-
executive session.
What's that?
As long as there's no executive session.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Mark, you want to do that poll then and try the 13th, and then if it looks like the majority of Planning Commission members can make
Yeah.
it, then.
Thank you.
Well, we need Al there since he's our go-to person.
Thank you.
For our board for planning, yeah, right? Okay. So let's try and set that up. Next item, the board will consider the motion to approve the solar energy system ordinance and direct publication in a local paper of general circulation as required by law.
So move.
Support.
Okay. Mr. Guzak?
I just have a question on when we set the June 13th meeting, we didn't have a motion on that. Do we need one for that?
I don't think
We're
you
gonna
do,
poll
because you just by consensus, well, and also you can't set it without the concurrence of the planning commission. So-
Right.
Okay. So, been a motion and seconded on the ordinance for the solar. Any discussion?
Yeah, so I'd just like to say a little bit, I don't know it'd be a protracted thing here, but I mean, the ordinance is really written around making sure that the installation of solar panels is done, with some aesthetics, some, standards around it. It's not necessarily promoting or inhibiting the installation of solar. It's simply just really the how to do it.
So, kind of dealing with the aesthetics of it, Mr.
The
Mansour?
glare, there's certain, placements on the structures of the building that, allow access to it, that type of thing.
Mhm. Okay. Any further questions? Well, this is a resolution.
Motion.
It's actually an ordinance amendment, zoning ordinance, so if you would do a roll call, that'd be great. You need a.
Okay, so I guess I will,
Excuse me, is this it says, consider motion to approve solar and direct the publication. Okay, so we don't have to wait for any time period, right? We can approve it here? Okay.
This is a zoning ordinance.
Yep.
Amendment, right? Yeah, no, so
Yes.
this is a one-shot deal for us.
Okay.
okay, we'll do a roll call. Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay, next item on the agenda, the board will consider a resolution to approve the request from Tournaments for Charity and Warwick Hills Golf and Country Club for a Class C license issued under MCL 436.1517A for September 9th through the 16th, 2019 by the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. This is for operation during the Allied Challenge Golf Tournament and requires local governing board approval.
Make the motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
So just a quick question here. This is basically the same thing as we did last year, yes?
It's the exact same thing that we did last year, then they'll also ask the police department if they will hold the existing liquor license in escrow during that same period of time, because it was kind of interesting, but they actually come in there, they take everything out of there and put their own stuff in, and they replace it all back right down to the plates, the serving pans, like the whole 9 yards,
Wow.
everything.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll call for the vote.
It's going to be a roll call.
Okay. Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay, so future agenda items is the board will begin review process for all township policies to include board, administrative, and financial policy review and adoption. Mr. Limita put together this beautiful binder. Mr. Limita?
So what you have in your binder is the existing policies as they sit right now. It's divided into 3 tabs. One is the board policy, of which there are 2 in there. The board minutes policy and the resolution policy. Then you go into the administrative policies that cover a lot of the general administration for all employees. And then finally, the 3rd tab is financial policies. You're not being asked to take any action at this point. We just wanted to get these out there as we discussed. We're hoping that you guys have the time to go through there. We probably won't put it back on the agenda until a meeting in June. I would think that is probably the 4th Tuesday meeting. If there's any policies that you'd like to suggest, if there's changes that you are concerned or would like to make in here, and what we hope to have happen is that we can adopt these policies in a fell swoop. They'll all have an effective date of the meeting that you adopt these, and we have the opportunity to move forward. The best thing about that is that then it supersedes anything that was behind. If there's any policies that existed that we're unaware of, that have just been kind of lost through the ages, anything that isn't effective in the date of the meeting of 2019 ceases to be an issue. So we think that would be a great way to get us started. And again, this is a perfect time for us to revise or relook at any of these policies as you go through. Take your time, go through them. And again, board policies, you just got a handout one of and I can't remember the township that I actually pulled a lot of it from, but and you're going through here like public participation at board meetings, anything that you guys want to suggest for the township board's adoption would be a good time for us to put those in. And then again, from general administrative, this is by no means, some of these have been updated in the last 12 months. All of our policies right now have been reviewed by Labor Council where that applied, Legal Council. If we are going to suggest anything, we'll still have it vetted either through David or Labor Council, depending on what it is. And so this will be the kickoff, and hopefully we can kind of get through it in the next 30 days.
So I think, one of the things that I think, and I appreciate you putting this together, Mr. Lehman, I think, what we want to do as a board is look at, where are we lacking in terms of policy. So right off, one of the overarching policies that I think we need to look at is our governance policy. In terms of our policy has been that Mr. Lehman is in charge of operational activities. The board pretty much focuses or is focused on the policy that we want Mr. Lehman to work within. And so I think we need to have, I don't believe that's in any of these policies, is it, Mr. Lehman?
It's not.
So we probably need to outline that as a policy, that we operate, that Mr. Limita is in charge of operations, and he's our sole employee that our board, works through to affect change with our staff. So, that's kind of one of the overarching that I see right off. And so, the other thing is, what things do we set policy on? I guess, Mr. Limita is setting policy with his staff in terms of how, hey, we don't want you doing this, we want you to do this kind of thing. So that's one set of policies, is, I guess you'd call them what, staff policies or?
General administrative.
General
policies.
Administrative, and so these would be more policies that the board would, maybe a policy would be that you won't put any policy in place that is, I don't know, unethical or, illegal or, what have you.
Yeah, you could adopt a governance policy that specifically states that it's
those
policy driven and how things work. And I can get you some samples of those as well. And then, like you said, the board policies, you guys have instituted, we didn't prior have any board policies before this board. You guys instituted the minutes policy and the resolution policy that you have included in the binder. Anything that you want to do from a board governance standpoint, this is a great time to do it before we adopt them.
Well, you know, and you can imagine if somebody's elected for the first time, what is the board policy on something? Well, let me dig through some stuff and try and find it. Having this, hey, somebody that's new, we can have a board orientation and say, let's run through these and, you know, see. The other thing I think that's important is that when we firm these up, we put some dates on there in terms of when we're going to review each section of policy. So for example, you know, our board governance policy, we're going to review that in February each year. Our finance policy, we're going to review that, you know, in March every year or whatever, but we set some time frames so that these don't just go on a shelf and we forget about them until we have a problem and then we try to find them. So I think you set timelines for when each of these sections or certain areas would need to be reviewed so that if somebody, you know, it doesn't prevent us from at any time having a policy that we say, hey, we want to stick something into, you know, credit card policy. We can change that whenever, but at least we've got a schedule for when we're going to definitely take a look at those items.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Massey.
I guess this may not sound right the way I'm going to ask this question. What's the difference between a policy and a process? Can we use a process as a policy? And the reason I'm asking this question is because Pine Hollow, the board members were under the impression that when Pine Hollow came to the meeting the first time, that all of the processes or procedures were followed. But when we had a meeting, you were there, Superintendent, I was there,
Yes.
the supervisor was there, we learned that the process or the procedure was not followed. Now, I left the meeting the first time Pine Hollow was here. I left the meeting with the understanding that the signatures that were collected by the residents in Pine Hollow were legally collected. Then we get in the meeting, they were illegally collected. They was written or typed on a napkin and turned in, and that napkin was passed on to the superintendent or the supervisor. I'm using my own definition as typed on an incorrect form. Okay? So I'm using the word napkin. Whatever piece of paper it was typed on, the names were typed on, it was illegal.
Well, I know what you're getting at, Mr. Massey. I understand. I think that process can be put into policy. So, for example, I think what Mr. Massey's talking about is that when a resident visits our office and says, hey, I want to talk to somebody about getting my streets paved. In our roads meeting, subcommittee, we talked about that the first person that person should talk to is Mr. Sears. And we don't want board members being dragged into that. Not dragged, but we don't want them getting involved in that first step. We want Mr. Sears to meet with them and tell them objectively what our policy is. Not that, well, we might be able to bend our board or what have you, but here's what our policy is. And so they know right from the get-go that this is what the board policy is, this is how it works. Now, if you want to work on changing the board policy, that's a different agenda item. So that's one of the policies we need to have is with regard to roads, I believe, Mr. Massey. So very good point.
Yes.
And what the policy is for where somebody goes when they have a question on roads, that it's to Mr. Sears and Mr. Sears only. And, or at least, unless it's Mr. Lehman and myself, and we will direct them to probably Mr. Sears, just so all the information's flowing through one person. But, you know, everybody on our board wants to do what's right for our residents. I don't fault anybody for wanting to do what's right, but we also, you know, one of the things that came up at our roads commission meeting, it's, you know, when people on social media ask, hey, who do I contact about garbage or this or that, oh, I'll take care of that for you, would be a real good, easy response for any one of us board members, you know, because, hey, we're helping residents by telling them. It's a little bit harder to say, you know, for that burn permit, you know, I probably know the answer to that burn question, but you know what? I want to give you the phone number for the fire department, and that's who you should talk to. Because you know what? Something may have changed between what I used to know and what's going on today. So I want you to talk directly to them, and that's why we pay them, is to answer those questions. Same with roads. Somebody comes in, wants to know, no, you need to talk to the person that's their job, you know. And I could look really good by trying to answer everybody's question, or all of us could, but you know what, the tougher part is to refer them to the correct person. But I think that's something very necessary in that policy, Mr. Massey, that you bring up, that we need to make sure that we outline that. So I'm sure Mr. Limita can help us to draft a policy with regard to that. But that's a good question, is, you know, process or policy, and I think we can put processes into policy. Okay. Mr. Atkins?
Can I add one thing to that? You know, I thought too, as we look at this, I don't know if this is a practice we do at the front desk or not, but you know, it would be interesting to have some sort of a sign-in sheet and understand when people walk in off the street what it is they're trying to accomplish while they're here and who are they dealing with. And then I think we can start to assess, are we getting them to the right people? It's not uncommon to do those types of sign-in sheets. And I think we can start to put together some data and make sure we're, you know, starting to direct to the correct people and make sure that they walk out of here with what they needed. So a little more customer service focused.
I think anytime somebody's coming into our building, we need to know who they are and, you know, what they're here for. And I think Mr. Lehman and I have talked about a couple of ideas. I don't know, Mr. Lehman, do you want to bring up the one idea that we talked about?
Yes, Supervisor Bennett and I just had this conversation, funny enough, about 2 weeks ago, about just having that sign-in sheet for everybody who comes in, so that we don't, number one, we're trying to secure the building. We've made great strides. We've gone through that Alice training a few times. We want to control access, you know, and not just have somebody wandering through the building. So we talked about that visitors policy, is that we'd much rather they came in, signed, and sat in the lobby, and then whoever they were here to see came and got them and brought them back. It's not unusual for a lot of other governmental entities to do that, so you're not just sending somebody like, yeah, just go ahead and head back. And I think that would help solve some of this. When somebody comes in, what is it you're asking for? And the form can be really simple. They put their name in there and who you're here to see. If they don't know who they're here to see, well, what's the question, and put it in there, then we know where they were directed. I think Trustee Atkins is 100% right. It just helps us make sure that we were giving the right information out from a customer service standpoint, as opposed to giving them to the wrong person. They left here with the wrong information. Then we only have ourselves to blame.
But, so...
Just a point of clarification. All the cashiers that I have, they don't send them anywhere. If they send them to your office, we always call your secretary.
Right.
And we don't send anybody back, okay? Your secretary either comes over, or your secretary will say, will you please escort them back? Okay? And they can't get anywhere. Their store's locked, that one's locked, so no one's wandering this building, okay? And we don't send anybody just anywhere. We make sure they're going to the proper place, okay? You can do your sign-in sheet if you want, but I'm just telling you, so you know people aren't wandering around and we're not just directing them anywhere.
Not to disagree, but Scott would, or Supervisor Bennett would bear this up. Earlier this year, we were in my office having a meeting, and we had a visitor, a resident, who wandered in to have a conversation and unannounced.
Well, I wish you would tell me about that, because then I could tell the staff what to do.
So yeah,
that's news to me.
Cashiers up front are very good, but this is a really simple process to control who is here.
Well, I understand the process. I just wanted to point out that I wasn't aware of that situation, and if I would have been, we'd have taken steps. But I'm in agreement with the sign-in sheet.
Right.
But it also lets us know what people are coming here for, you know, if, you know, where the traffic is headed, you know.
So if someone comes in and says, I want to talk to the water bill, we want them to sign in first before we send them down to the water bill, right?
If they're here to see somebody or get a question answered, if somebody knows that they're going to the planning department to drop off some forms, are we gonna have them not go to the planning department? We don't have that controlled access. I mean, they're gonna walk right past and go to the planning department.
Right, so they don't have to sign in, right?
Well,
Or
it
do
just, it's, are they going, where, you know, where do we want to control it? I mean, it's that controlling that access. I don't know yet, Earl, until we have the policy put together, but how much will we control it?
Because a lot of them do go past, say, I gotta drop this off to so-and-so, you know, which is either Becky, not Becky, well, some of them want to give it to Becky, some of them want to give it to Amy, and some of them want to give to Mary Marie in the back, and some want to go to
Well, some of it depends
DPW.
on, some of it depends on what we do to remodel that front area too.
Correct.
If we remodel the front area and people have to go through a door to get to some of these offices.
Well, that's what we suggested, we wanted it locked down, so
Right.
that
So I mean,
way.
it isn't as though we're trying to punish anybody. It's,
I'm not putting, no,
we're
I'm just
trying-
asking a question.
We're just trying to
And I'm the one that
say
said
what,
we should have it all blocked off, but it hasn't been done. I'm just asking,
Yeah.
do we need to have them sign in? Say, no, you can't walk back there, sign in first.
it may come to that point if we have a door to go back there. It's-
Well, right now, if we don't have a door, what happens?
No, we don't have the policy yet.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to figure this out.
Well, you know, Supervisor, I think when we even get to policy, I think anyone that's going beyond a certain mark should sign in. Because, and I'll tell you why. Let me be very explicit about this. I understand your concerns.
No, I'm all for
You're
it.
right.
I'm just trying to
But
verify.
Let me give you, not a hypothetical situation, let me give you a real situation.
Great.
I'm at the door. So I'm gonna prove to everybody in the world that this new sign-in system doesn't work. Because we've said, if you're going back to the, speak to someone in the, say, building department, okay? So all I have to do is let someone in through the back door, okay?
No,
They said,
they
I
don't go
thought they
back
was
there.
going to the building department,
They don't go back
or
there.
to the water department.
They
I
don't
use
go
the
back
water
there. It's
department.
all locked down, Joel.
They have a counter back there.
Said if somebody let them in back there.
If somebody let them in. Because we have people around here now. I don't trust everybody here.
Well, I'll give you an example too, Mr. Massey. I was in here last week and saw a couple of gentlemen walking around, and with us remodeling the fire area, we've got people that are here for all sorts of things. And you know, I asked them, I said, can I help you? You know, you guys, because they're looking around and wondering, okay, who are these guys? 'Cause
Yes.
I haven't, you know, not that I should know who they are, but you know, at that point, maybe they should have had a visitor thing on or something that indicated they were working here, because they're walking around the hallways. I don't know if they were looking at sprinkler system or what they're looking at, but bottom line is, you know, we're continually looking at how do we improve ourselves. And, you know, we don't have all the answers figured out, but we know where we need to get. So anyways, great suggestions, and I'm sure everyone will look at these tonight, and tomorrow have a list of suggested policies to turn in. Right, Mr. Atkins?
Was that a couple weeks from now?
Supervisor Bennett, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
So
We're just getting started.
support.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
All right.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Since you're-
Scott, we just want to try and keep